Something feels not quite right about Star Trek Voyager.
We are in the Delta Quadrant, 70,000 light years from you.
It's stranded and alone in the Delta Quadrant, on the far side of the galaxy. Several seasons in, the ship looks pristine and new, both inside and out. It feels like the ship should start to look and feel battered. We saw this briefly in the 2-part Year of Hell storyline. It feels like much of Voyager should have felt like what we saw in those episodes. But Year of Hell aside, we don't see that in Voyager. For the most part, the ship looks intact, the crew stays stable, and because of that, it can feel like something's missing. It feels like a series about survival in a dangerous faraway place let the characters off too easily. But that only makes sense if you expect that struggle to leave visible marks. Instead, Voyager is telling the story of a different kind of survival. One which stretches from its first episode to its last, and one where the real pressure isn't written across the hull of the ship. To understand the kind of survival story Voyager is actually telling, we first need to understand what Star Trek had become by the time Voyager launched. Because by the mid-1990s, Star Trek had already spent years defining what a 24th century human being was supposed to be. The original series showed a future where humans had overcome many of their difficulties and united.
We faced a similar crisis in our early nuclear age. We found the wisdom not to destroy ourselves. Our authority is the United Earth Space Probe Agency.
United and now had reached for the stars, seeking out new life forms and new civilizations.
The mission of the Enterprise is to seek out and contact alien life.
The Next Generation was set a century later and builds on the idea. By this point, those ideals are much more clearly defined. Within Starfleet, they aren't just stated. There's something the crew genuinely believes in.
I'm with Starfleet. We don't lie.
A line lacking subtlety, but it captures the idea of Starfleet officers as people of moral principles. In the pilot episode, Encounter at Farpoint, Q puts humanity on trial, arguing that humans are savage.
Therefore I say test us! Test whether this is presently true of humans.
Picard doesn't argue the point. He simply tells Q to look at who they are now. This was to be the show's universe of the 24th Century Federation and Starfleet.
This so-called court should get down on its knees to what Starfleet is, what it represents.
And if the Next Generation showed us a utopian federation, its spin-offs were to show us the contrast of life outside the Federation. Deep Space Nine shows us Bajor, a planet which has been occupied by the Cardassian Union, a brutal military dictatorship which tortures suspects as standard.
Well, you wouldn't want to turn a man, any man, over to their tender care, sir.
The initial premise of Deep Space Nine was that Bajor has been abandoned by the Cardassians and has subsequently applied for Federation membership.
Sounds like they're not ready. Your job is to do everything, short of violating the Prime Directive, to make sure that they are.
The mission is clear. Starfleet is to bring Federation values to an outside world. And throughout its 7-year run, Deep Space Nine would show some of the complications of the ideals of the Federation when tested in extreme situations.
I've spent the last year and a half of my life ordering young men and young women to die. I like that even less.
That's a glib answer.
And Deep Space Nine asks a more difficult question. Is it actually possible to hold on to those ideals outside of the Federation? What if that structure wasn't there?
Well, it's easy to be a saint in paradise.
And what happens when outside of the Federation, those ideals come into conflict with survival?
If something disastrous happens to the Federation, would we stay true to our ideals or...
The Next Generation showed the ideals of the Federation. Deep Space Nine asked, what happens when those ideals come under pressure? Voyager would take that question even further. Voyager removes the Federation from the equation completely and asks whether its ideals would still survive when they are no longer reinforced by the Federation itself.
Would we stay true to our ideals or...
And Voyager starts running the experiment in the pilot episode Caretaker.
Shall I activate the program to get us back?
And what happens to the Okamba after we're gone?
Janeway is given a brutal choice. She can get her crew home, or she can hold to Starfleet principles and accept the cost of being stranded.
But I'm not willing to trade the lives of the Okamba for our convenience. We'll have to find another way home.
Janeway makes her choice, at huge cost. Caretaker sets the standard and foundational idea of the series from the start. Starfleet principles have a cost.
We're alone, in an uncharted part of the galaxy. We have no idea of the dangers we're going to face.
Once Voyager establishes that Starfleet principles carry consequences, the series begins exploring what living with that decision actually looks like. And that's influenced by the first question. What is the nature of the Delta Quadrant they're now trapped in? And it's another excellent example of Voyager building on the TV series which had come before it. The Next Generation had shown us that Earth is in a sector of the galaxy populated by multiple superpowers. The Federation, the Klingon Empire, the Romulan Empire, the Cardassian Union. And Deep Space Nine had shown us that the Gamma Quadrant is dominated by one superpower.
The Dominion will no longer stand by and allow ships from your side to violate our territory.
Voyager showed us a quadrant that doesn't have any dominant superpowers. Even the Borg would be shown to mainly stay within their own space and leave other races alone.
Lower your phasers. If we don't appear threatening, they should ignore us.
And the absence of a dominant authority in the quadrant would have huge bearing on what the Voyager crew would face. One of the first races encountered by the Voyager crew are the Kazon, the space equivalent of street gangs filling the lawless quadrant.
Kazon sects control this part of the quadrant. Some have food, some have ore, some have water. They all trade and they all kill each other.
And the more advanced Federation technology on board Voyager makes it an instant target for the Kazon.
I'd be more interested in acquiring this technology that allows you to create water from thin air.
The Caretaker and the Okamba force Janeway to establish the principle. The Kazon arc asks whether they should abandon their principles for immediate survival.
To survive, we must have powerful friends. The Kazon Nistrim were willing to be our protectors in return for some minor technology.
Janeway is initially resistant.
Technology that could change the balance of power in this quadrant. How can I consider it? I can't just walk away from the precepts Starfleet has laid out for us.
But she eventually flirts with the idea because she thinks she might be able to control the impact.
We wouldn't give them weapons or technology, but we would pledge to support and defend them if they're attacked.
Tuvok convinces her that it might even bring temporary stability to the quadrant if they were to use their leverage wisely.
It might bring stability to the region and security for us.
But when it ends badly, Janeway reasserts Voyager's mission statement.
We have to have something stable to rely on, and we do. The principles and ideals of the Federation.
Caretaker established they wouldn't abandon their principles. The Kazon forced them to realise they wouldn't pick and choose the principles for pragmatic survival. But there's a clever thematic twist to the idea of sharing technology, because in the episode Prime Factors, Voyager encounters a civilization with technology that could drastically shorten their journey home.
We cannot share our technology. It might fall into the hands of those who would abuse it, and our canon of laws strictly forbids that.
It's the first time we've been on the other side of the fence. The one that's made of binding principles.
A black marketeer offers to sell Voyager the technology.
Many people believe that rules should be flexible enough to meet the needs of the moment.
In some ways, this is a very dangerous test of principles, because in Prime Factors, breaking laws and principles seems to have no obvious consequences beyond the moral. And some of the Starfleet officers feel this and attempt to obtain the technology on the Sicarian black market.
I want you to explain to me how you, of all people, could be involved in this.
Prime Factors shows us how quickly even principled people begin rationalizing exceptions when survival and apparently low costs become involved. And Janeway's reaction makes it clear that those are the dangerous moments.
You can use logic to justify almost anything. That's its power and its flaw.
But Voyager isn't only about whether the crew can maintain Starfleet principles under direct threat. It's also about what happens when Janeway has to interpret those principles alone. The lawless Delta Quadrant regularly tests Janeway with more extreme situations than a captain might typically find back home.
Whether to commit murder to save a life, or to allow my own crewman to die while you breathe air through his lungs.
And species such as the Vidians show the danger of abandoning principles gradually to survive at any cost.
Sometimes, when the need is immediate, more aggressive actions are required.
And Janeway has to deal with the extreme moral dilemmas she faces without support from Starfleet.
If we were closer to home, I would lock you up and turn you over to my authorities for trial. But I don't even have that ability here.
Janeway must deal with whatever situation she faces alone, no matter how difficult.
Will you send him to prison for eternity? Or will you assist in his suicide plan? That's a toughie, but then again, that's why they made you captain, isn't it? To handle the real tough ones.
But Voyager doesn't only test whether Janeway will defend Starfleet principles. It also tests where those principles apply. Voyager has to rely on its emergency medical hologram full time.
Please state the nature of the medical emergency.
He's a tool that's used when needed and switched off otherwise.
Computer, end medical holographic program.
And the process of starting to see the Doctor as a crew member rather than a tool isn't triggered by the Doctor showing abilities.
If I can reconfigure my emitter array, I might be able to create a pair of holographic lungs for Mr. Neelix.
And Janeway isn't convinced by an intellectual argument.
He's self-aware. He's communicative. He has the ability to learn because he's been programmed to do that.
What changes Janeway's mind is an appeal to the ideal of what a Starfleet officer is supposed to be.
So because he's a hologram, he doesn't have to be treated with respect or any consideration at all? Very well. I'll look into it.
Eventually, it becomes clear to the audience that Janeway isn't going to abandon Starfleet principles. She stabilizes as a figure of moral authority. But rather than allowing that stabilization to become predictable, Voyager turns it into an asset by giving us a mirror of Janeway in the episode Equinox. Another Starfleet vessel stranded in the Delta Quadrant, but one which has let Starfleet principles slip one small piece at a time.
I couldn't help but notice your crew calls you by your first name.
Rank and protocol are luxuries.
Ransom and his crew have taken the exact opposite of Janeway's stance from back in Caretaker.
And made a few enhancements on our warp engines. You mean we need to kill more life forms? Several more.
They're sacrificing another race just to help them get home.
If we turn our backs on our principles, we stop being human.
But Equinox also reveals something more unsettling. Away from the Federation, the captain becomes the person deciding what Starfleet means.
Starfleet Regulation 3, Paragraph 12.
I doubt that protocol covers mass murder.
In my judgment, it did.
By this stage in the series, we the audience have no doubt about Janeway's principles and how she'll respond.
He's a Starfleet captain, and he's decided to abandon everything this uniform stands for.
Which is why Voyager's final episode, Endgame, is the perfect conclusion to the central premise of the series. With the series having shown us the various moral dilemmas one at a time, Endgame asks the question, what was the cumulative cost? We see an older Janeway still carrying the weight of the journey and the people she lost along the way.
You chose to put the lives of strangers ahead of the lives of your crew.
For the first time, the series fully reckons with the burden Janeway has carried for 7 years. The crew avoided moral corruption, partly by absorbing the consequences themselves. Throughout its 7 years, Voyager operated on a much more sophisticated level than that of a series of an obviously battered and damaged ship. The fact the crew has replicator technology was never going to make ship repairs an interesting long-term arc. Instead, Voyager started by asking if Starfleet officers could stick to their principles, stripped of the support structure of the Federation. Its answer was a definite yes.
We did it.
But it went beyond its initial question to show us the difficulties and the cost. Voyager's real story was never about whether the ship could survive the journey. Instead, it asked a very Star Trek question: whether the people aboard it could survive that journey without losing their humanity.